Welcome into Dolphins Today. I'm your host, Jake Riepma. And you know the saying, we used it last week in victory. We're going to use it this week as well in defeat. You get 24 hours, and then it's time to turn the page. So we're turning the page. We are on to our preview of the New York Giants. And if you want the Dolphins to bounce back and move to 4-1 on the season, it's real simple. You got to subscribe to Dolphins Today. What's happening, everybody? It feels really, really good to take a look at the Dolphins' upcoming matchup because let's face it, on paper, this has all the makings of a get-right game for the Miami Dolphins. You see it right there. They're 10.5-point favorites in the early line against the New York Giants in week number 5 of the National Football League, and you're back at Hard Rock Stadium. So, that being said, we're going to get into all the reasons in which I believe the Dolphins have a great chance to move to 4-1 on the season for the first time in 20 years. How about that? But the game isn't played on paper, right? It is the National Football League after all. So we can say this, that, and the other, but at the end of the day, it'll be about the Dolphins executing and a live football game. And speaking of live, you got to join us on Wednesday. That's when we're going live on Dolphins Today. We'll have a live show for you beginning at 5 o'clock. It's always a blast when we hop on there live. And, of course, for Sunday's game against the New York Giants, we'll have our watch party. You got to subscribe for that watch party. We have a ton of fun. Bring you real play-by-play analysis. We do all kinds of giveaways, our super chat menu. It's always a blast, and it's one community, which is what I love about Dolphins Today. So 3-1 on the season. It's been an all right start. Obviously got roughed up a little bit last week against the Bills and Buffalo, but we're turning the page. We're on to week 5, and that's where the Dolphins can thrive. So join us on Wednesday at 5 o'clock Eastern for our live show of the week, and then again on Sunday for our live watch party. Both of them you're not going to want to miss. Now, yes, the Dolphins are very much the favorite. 10.5. That's the largest favorite of the National Football League in week number 5 in the initial line. So, all the makings of a get-right game, a bounce-back game. But with that said, that can also have the makings of a trap game. Listen, the Giants, everybody watched them on Monday Night Football last night. It was not good. It was ugly. They could not block the Seattle Seahawks. More on that in a little bit. However, when a team looks that bad, there's one of two ways things can go. They can completely crumble, or they can get desperate and a little bit dangerous. And you know what? I'm going to give the Giants the benefit of the doubt that they're not ready to punt on this season. They're not one of those egregious teams that are talking about the draft already. They're not ready to tank. And yes, I use air quotes there because, of course, nobody's actually tanking. But you know what I'm saying. The Giants are a desperate team trying to right the ship. Desperately trying to right the ship because this is a playoff team from last year. In fact, a team that won a playoff game last year. So, yes, they're 1-3. Brian Daboll is in his second year as head coach with the 500 record at 11-11 and with the 1 tie. But this Giants team has not been able to block anybody. They allowed 11 sacks in that Monday Night Football game against the Seattle Seahawks. And, I personally felt bad for Daniel Jones. The guy had no chance, albeit he didn't really help himself out with a couple of different turnovers. But point being, this is an opportunity for the Miami Dolphins, who are a superior team on paper, but they got to go out and execute it. Not only that, the Giants, it just have been bad on offense. They haven't scored a first-half touchdown yet this season. In fact, they have not led with their offense on the field. Their one win, they got a late go-ahead field goal against the Cardinals in week number 2, and they are last in scoring offense, just 11.5 points per game. So that's the New York Giants. And you know what? That's okay. That's them. It's about us. It's about the Dolphins. And more on the New York Giants about who they did not play or who did not play in last Monday Night Football game in Week 4 against the Seattle Seahawks, beginning with Bobby McCain, the safety. We all know about Saquan Barkley, a huge part of what this Giants team does offensively, has not been active in the last couple of games. And then Andrew Thomas, he's a former All-Pro offensive lineman, a former first overall draft pick. He also did not play on Monday night. Jordan Riley was also inactive for that one as well. So to add insult to injury, a lot of the key contributors for the Giants are unable to participate or were unable to participate in week number 4. And none more notable than Saquon Barkley, one of the faces of the National Football League, especially one at the running back position, just an all-time great at that position. But he suffered that high ankle sprain in the fourth quarter in week 2 in their win over Arizona. He was a limited participant in practice leading up to the Monday Night Football game, which gave Giants fans, their head coach, and everybody else a glimmer of hope that maybe he'd be able to play versus Seattle. But, of course, he was unable to and inactive in that game. However, that tells me that he's trending in the right direction. So, obviously, we're early in the week. We don't have anything specific yet on whether or not Saquon will play against the Dolphins. But if he was trending in that position of trying to play on Monday Night Football, you got to believe there is a reasonable chance he'll play against Miami on Sunday. So, with that, I ask who? Who you got? You know where I stand. I am Dolphins all the way on this one, but I need you to let me know in the chat. Type D for Dolphins or G if you're back in the G-Men. The New York Football Giants. They haven't had it together this week. Their one win over Arizona came with a late comeback, a furious comeback for that matter. But in my opinion, the Dolphins are the superior team, in everybody's opinion. You look at the stats, the numbers, there is no contest in this one. On paper, I'm going to keep saying that. On paper, you still got to go out and execute. Dolphins Today is brought to you by Game Time. So excited to tell you about Game Time for a couple of different reasons, but mostly at the top of that list, it is the only ticketing app I use for a couple of different reasons. One, I can rest assured know I'm getting the best deal, last minute, lowest price guarantee, which is obviously super important to me. But personal experience. Look, I've been using Game Time well before I joined Chat Sports and things for like concerts and baseball games, football games. You want to go see the Dolphins at home this weekend against the Giants, Hard Rock Stadium. Game Time is the app for you. Super easy to use as well. So you forget those renderings or anything. It's not a grainy photo. You can see exactly where you're going to be sitting. And like I said, you can rest assured knowing you're getting the best price, lowest price guarantee. And for being a Dolphins fan and Dolphins subscriber, we've got a special deal for you. $20 off your first purchase by using that promo code FINSCHAT. We got it on the screen for you there on the bottom, but it's PHINSCHAT. FINSCHAT gets you $20 off on your first purchase. So snag those tickets without any stress thanks to Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code FINSCHAT for that $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but create that account, redeem it using the code FINSCHAT for $20 off. Download Game Time today for last-minute tickets with the lowest price guaranteed. Now, like I said, this Giants team, it's been ugly. And this isn't me just lambasting it on a team that has really struggled out of the gates here in the National Football League, but it's calling a spade a spade. They've been really bad, and Daniel Jones have been really bad. And yes, it's not exactly his fault for a lot of different reasons, but that completion percentage at 68.7, 765 yards. But what we really got to dial in there, the 2 touchdowns compared to 6 interceptions. He's been a turnover machine, and this is a Dolphins defense that can be opportunistic. They weren't against Buffalo, but an opportunity for them to rewrite the ship and get back to forcing turnovers. Also, an opportunity to get after the quarterback. What did we talk about in our instant reaction against the Bills as well as our overreaction on Monday? There was no pressure on Josh Allen and he was able to carve up the Dolphins secondary. The Giants have allowed 22 sacks in 5 games. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry, in 4 games. It's absolutely ridiculous. 22 sacks. It's the second most in the National Football League, behind just the Washington Commanders, who have allowed 23 sacks. So the Giants right behind them, allowing 22 sacks in a 4-game sample. The Bears have also allowed 17. It's worth noting that this Dolphins defense can have an opportunity to get back to sacking the quarterback. They had a couple of sacks in week 1 that proved to help the Dolphins win over the Chargers. And I said it yesterday, I'll say it again today. It's kind of a wake-up call for some key contributors on that interior defensive line and that defensive line in general. Edge rusher, Bradley Chubb, Christian Wilkins, Emmanuel Ogbah, they've got to be better. 0 sacks, 0 tackle for loss, just the 1 hit on Josh Allen on Sunday. Of the Dolphins' 10 sacks for the entire season, only 3 of them have come from D linemen. So Vic Fangio's had to dial up pressure in different ways. Andrew Van Ginkel had 2 sacks against Buffalo. But you understand the point I'm trying to make. It's that this Giants offensive line can't block anybody. So for the Dolphins, let's start making it happen on the defensive line in the trenches and put some pressure on Daniel Jones, which he has obviously struggled with all season long. So my challenge is very simple. I like a goal. I like shooting for the stars in a game in which you feel you can have success. I believe the Dolphins should be able to compile 5 sacks on Sunday's game against the New York Giants. And I think that's a part of the keys to success, is being able to get pressure on Daniel Jones. So 5 sacks. 5 sacks. Let's see if the Dolphins defense can get in. I don't care how they come, whether it's corner blitzes, linebacker blitzes, defensive line, you name it. 5 sacks on Daniel Jones. That's the challenge this week for the Miami Dolphins. And part of that challenge, I believe, will fall on ears that are listening because of what Tua Tagovailoa said on Sunday after the game. It's been well documented that Tua made it very clear that he believes this was a much-needed, humbling loss at the hands of the Bills. He said, quote, after the game on Sunday, I would say it's very humbling for a lot of people to have the highest high, referring to the 70 points scored against Denver in week number 3, and then you lose in a manner like this. And yeah, it's very humbling, and it's, for some, it's much needed. Now, who those some are, we're not exactly sure, but you get the point. This Dolphins team should be hungry after that wake-up call on Sunday in the losing effort against the Bills. So offensively, defensively, special teams, I want to see a hungry Dolphins team. Look at the comparison between these two teams. It's quite literally the best versus the worst in a lot of different statistical areas. That includes points per game. The Giants, 11.5 points per game, worse than the National Football League. The Dolphins, 37.5, the best in the NFL. Best versus worst. Defensively, the Dolphins have not been good. They're 28th in scoring defense. So maybe an opportunity to improve in that category as a defensive unit. Touchdowns, offensive yards per play. The Dolphins have been the best. Nobody better. 8 yards per play. That's first in the National Football League. The Giants, not last, but next to last with just 4 yards per play. And that might not be the most accurate telling of the success of an offense, but you get the idea. Also, really important to know, how many times we talk about turnover margin in the NFL? Turnovers allowed. The Giants have committed 8 turnovers compared to the Dolphins' 5, and forced. The Dolphins' defense have forced 5 turnovers over the course of 3 games. The Giants have not forced a takeaway in 4 games. That's another reason why they've really struggled out of the gates. But point being, this is an area on paper in which the Dolphins are the superior team. So it's a get-right game. It can also be a trap game. You got to stay hungry. Yes, Tua said this team needed to be humbled. They were against the Buffalo Bills. Now it's about bouncing back against an inferior opponent and doing what they're capable of doing. We saw it, especially on the offensive end. We saw it against the Broncos. We saw it against the Chargers. A good team win against New England. And week number 5 has all the makings for exactly that. And where can the Dolphins really expose the New York Giants? A couple of different areas. In the trenches, both offensively and defensively. Based on a lot of things to look at, a lot of different metrics, the Giants have arguably the worst offensive line in the NFL. They've allowed 22 sacks. We went over all of that. So let's expose them and have some success in the trenches. That goes on the offensive side of things as well. The Giants' defensive line and front seven hasn't been great. The Dolphins have a great rushing attack. We didn't see a ton of it on Sunday against Buffalo. Devon Achane was still over 100 yards, but this could be an opportunity for a breakout game for him and Raheem Mostert, again, by way of rushing the football, because the Dolphins should be able to excel in the trenches. Offensively, you know this offense, a huge calling card for Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa is the air raid and the success through the pass. This pass offense should be able to dominate a Giants defense that is last in many defensive categories, including points per game. So let's see Tua and his cast of weapons really light it up on Sunday against the Giants. Get back to protecting Tua, keeping him upright, keeping him clean, so that he can spread the ball around. Guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Braxton Berrios, the list goes on. But you should have the full arsenal of weapons on the offensive side of things. So let's expose this Giants team through the air. I talked a little bit about the rush offense, but it's worth repeating. Raheem Mostert had a little bit of an off game, a very off game by his standards against the Bills. Would love to see him getting back downhill. And this offensive line, yes, a little bit banged up. Still not sure on Connor Williams, but hopefully he can play at center so those holes can continue to be open for Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane like they were in Week 3 against Denver. And lastly, we talked about it, right? The Giants have not forced a turnover yet. The Dolphins defense has forced 5 through in 4 games. So not the most impressive numbers, but an area in which the Dolphins should excel. Also, Daniel Jones, prone to committing turnovers. He's thrown 6 interceptions. He's lost 1 fumble, and he's been sacked 22 times this year. So I really look for this to be a get-right game for the Miami Dolphins. And you know what? I'm going to get wild with my score prediction because I've got pretty high expectations for Miami, and I want you to do the same thing. Be honest with yourself, but what do you predict that score to be? Again, it's the league's top offense versus the league's, in a lot of categories, worst defense. Also, this Dolphins defense, they're 28th right now in scoring defense, but can they right the ship and use this as a game to get back to their identity, back to that defense that we hope they're capable of, and that defense that we had high expectations for in bringing in Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator. So let me know in the comments, predict the score, Dolphins versus Giants on Sunday. All right, that said, I want to tie a bow on it with this. When you are superior to the opponent, you can't let them hang around. So I'm not going to get motivational, and I think the Dolphins know, look, we got our you-know-what's kicked on Sunday in Buffalo. Now is the opportunity for a response at home, Hard Rock Stadium, against an inferior opponent, and you can really go for the jugular on the Giants' season. Their season, in a lot of senses, could be over if the Dolphins steal their soul on Sunday. So they're plenty capable of doing it. I'm not necessarily going to get crazy with 70 points, but I think the Dolphins can certainly score 7 touchdowns. So I'm going to go 49-20. Let's see that Dolphins high-powered offense on full display against an inferior defense. And look, go out and do what you're capable of doing. Bounce back from a tough loss on the road. Be the team we hope this Dolphins team is, and I can't wait to watch on Sunday. So join us Wednesday for our live show at 5 o'clock Eastern, as well as our live watch party on Sunday. We have a ton of fun, and subscribe to the channel for all kinds of Dolphins content, breaking news, trade talk, rumor talk, injury updates, the whole 9 yards. Dolphins Today has you covered. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Dolphins Today and our preview of Dolphins versus Bills. Man, I can't wait for Sunday. The Dolphins Dolphins versus Giants. I still have last week on my head. Dolphins versus Giants. Dolphins are going to go out and take it to them. I can't wait for that. And we'll see you next time on Dolphins Today.